Project.
Welcome to the Project, the podcast with the mission to cover every project throughout pop culture and history. I'm Sam.
I'm Lewis.
And I'm Hamish.
Woo, that's right. Hamish is back to join us for our 101st episode.
He is the first person to appear 3 times.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, Kane's done 2, David's done 2, Amy's done 1.
I'll trust you on that, yeah, but...
I think I figured that out recently with Kane, and he was like, oh, Hamish.
Did you mention David then?
Yeah.
Okay. Hamish, sorry.
With it being the 101st episode, I
Yeah.
hope it's not going to be like a Room 101 scenario and I'm going to be banned forever.
What is it, we drop you into a shoot or something? Is that
Exactly,
right?
Yeah, so Hamish doesn't know what we're talking about. Listeners will know because it'll be in the episode description.
Yes.
But he's about to find out that we're going to be talking about his worst nightmares for the next 2 hours.
That's right. Well, Lewis has in detail researched a topic, and that is, Hamish's fears and nightmares and dark secrets and all that sort
We've
of
only
thing.
got 2 hours. I don't think we've got enough.
Oh, that's why I said it might be a 2-parter.
Oh, yeah, that's all right then.
Yeah, anyone who looks at the episode title who's listening to this will know whether we made it to 1 or 2 episodes.
Yeah.
We're aiming for the 1, so fingers crossed there. But before we get to that, we've got time codes in the episode description, so if you want to skip ahead, you can do so. If you want to skip past all this and skip straight to the juicy topic, you can do so. But before that, how are you today, Hamish?
I'm very good, thank you. I had a lovely time in the sun. And yeah, just been enjoying myself thoroughly.
Weather's been good, hasn't it?
It has
Actually,
been lovely.
You'll find it gets very hot in here, so that fan might be coming on at some point.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad to hear you've been good. But how about you, Lewis?
Yeah, all good. Me and Christina yesterday managed to get tickets for Taylor Swift next year.
Oh, I saw she posted that. Wow,
So
yeah.
That's exciting. I think it's
Wow.
literally like 5 days before my birthday as well. So
fair.
that'll be fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not till like next year.
I remember talking about it with you, and you were like, "Oh, she'll probably bring me," but I'm not a massive Taylor Swift fan.
I
But,
like Taylor.
like, yeah.
I've got like 11 months to listen through.
We
her
spoke about her
discography.
for about 15 minutes a couple episodes ago.
We
so
did.
You've clearly got things to say about Taylor Swift.
But, yeah.
Nothing too controversial, I don't think.
I'm sure she's heard it.
Yeah,
It's fine.
Of course.
Like,
We tagged her in
yeah,
it, so
exactly.
if she
She
didn't
did
listen.
text me after being like, "Come on, Lewis, like." Maybe change your opinion slightly. And I was like, I don't think I was that harsh, Tay-Tay. And she was like, oh, Lulu, it's fine.
That's how Christina got the tickets as well.
Yeah,
of course. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
But yeah, that's that. How are you, Sam?
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, nothing really to report. Yeah, I'm good. I didn't get Taylor Swift tickets.
Oh.
I didn't try, but I also didn't get tickets.
Christina tried to get 4 because she was like, I guarantee we can get like 2 more people to
Oh,
come
yeah,
with
yeah.
us. But at that point, there was only like, she could only buy
Also,
2.
like, approximately how much was it?
Including like fees and stuff, it was
Yeah.
like 200 quid a ticket.
Okay, yeah, I know. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have done it at the drop of a hat then. I was going to say, yeah, I would definitely come along, but yeah, Hamish
Yeah.
just shaking his
No
head.
chance.
Yeah, considering like festival ticket. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
I do
I
get it. I do get it.
And Paramore are supporting as well. And I was like,
Oh,
oh, that's
that'd be
cool.
cool.
I
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I like Paramore.
That's weird. That when we talked about Taylor Swift, we also talked about Paramore a few
Yeah,
weeks
we
ago.
did.
So
Weird.
intrinsically,
You two are
linked.
ahead of the curb. You are.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it might have already been announced by that point, but we didn't know, so
You definitely.
we were catching up on the curve.
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the curve.
You said curve and then you said
You threw me over.
It's
You
curb.
curve.
it's curve.
No,
It's like on the graph, you're ahead of the curve. So you're
Yeah.
like you're before.
Why
the
would you be ahead of a curb?
I've never really got it before.
It's because like if you're
Yeah,
not in
on the
the
graph,
majority,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
That's
you're
what
ahead
that's
of
how
the
I always
curve.
saw it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of right on the curve, what's the first segment, Lewis?
Oh, I think you probably mean Project News.
Yes, that's You excited, Hamish?
I'm very excited.
I just got one because I thought this might be a long episode.
Yes.
As always, I've googled the word project and seen what come up, and this one is from Eastern Eye.
Ooh. Does that-
EYEI.
Yeah, no, yeah, I figured that. But it made me think, doesn't the Eastern Eye depend on which direction you're facing?
Very good point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
I
And
guess
all,
it's
all
more-
times do you have a western and eastern if you're facing horizontally on the axis
Yeah.
of the
But if you're
yeah.
facing,
well, always
sometimes you've got both. I think
Yeah.
we're focusing on the wrong
If
part
you had to
here.
guess where the East was, what would you go with?
What, as in the context of this?
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's like Asia focused news.
Yeah, it's India.
Okay. Yeah.
So Prabhas's first look from Project K released. According to filmmakers, Project K will be the first ever Indian film to debut at Comicon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so this is something to do with the RRR team. Somebody is involved. Does it mention that at all?
I can't remember who's in the RRR
No,
team. I
that's
don't think
fair
it doesn't
enough.
mention RRR.
Oh, fair enough.
The RRR team just sound like a load of posh people.
But yeah, it's a big budget, superhero type film. I think they specifically said it's not like your usual superhero film. It's going to be Indian made and it's going to be a Comic-Con, so that's all quite exciting. It's called Project K, so that got me excited because we can definitely cover that in the near future.
Yeah, I think it's just been compared to RRR with its scale and its kind of action. Have you heard of RRR? Hamish?
No, I haven't.
So it's on Netflix. I don't know the name of anybody involved, unfortunately, but it's like a big budget kind of historical epic, but it kind of smudges the historical fact.
Oh, nice.
It's a bit anime with its kind of action, and it's got dance numbers and stuff.
It's got very like Bollywood scenes.
Very Bollywood kind of thing, and it's on Netflix. It's 2 hours 50, 3 hours long, so it's a real long thing. But it's like it's these two guys kind of overthrowing the British in like 1900 or whatever. It's not very historical accurate, but it's
I've seen clips and it does look fun. Like,
it is
very
really
silly.
fun.
It also won an Oscar.
Yeah,
for best original song.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. And the same director and maybe some of the returning cast did a two-parter that's also on Netflix called Bahubali, which is kind of like, I guess, Lord of the Rings meets Shakespeare meets kind of 300.
Oh,
So it's like a two-part it's two-part kind of fantasy epic. With songs and flashbacks and reveals and family drama and stuff. So
nice.
they're also about 3 hours each. So that's 6 hours just of those ones. But if you're ever in the mood for something kind of fun and funny and entertaining, then they're definitely worth checking out.
Something to put on in the background while I'm working.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, you might get a bit distracted,
Oh,
but
maybe.
yeah, you can watch most of them in a day. So yeah, but yeah, anything even compared to that, especially with Project. In the title,
I mean,
very
if it's
interesting.
getting shown at Comic-Con, it may also be them trying to appeal to the Indian market a bit. But if it's getting shown, they're going to pick something notable to be the first film at Comic-Con to be I presume they've probably got like a panel and stuff there.
Yeah.
So we'll probably Comic-Con is like next week, I think.
Yeah, because a lot of the major film companies have not. Well, DC and Marvel have both not presenting anything there. But that's partly because they both have their own corporate conventions anyway.
Yeah.
Because Disney have D23, although they don't do that every year, so I don't know.
But they just probably don't have much
and they
on.
have DC Fandome, which is a bizarre name.
I mean, it's probably another reason why this is getting time at Comic-Con if Marvel and DC aren't there. But
yeah, did it say release? I didn't hear you.
No,
mention
it
that.
doesn't. I did have a look through, but
Okay.
presumably like later this year or early next year, if it's
you'd
been talked about
imagine so,
Comic-Con.
yeah,
They've released the poster, which
Is it got big hands?
you can't
Oh.
really see.
I just saw when I had that article open, it looked like a big statue's hand in the desert with its fingers curled upwards and people kind of approaching it.
Right. Oh, yeah. It's being released in January 2024.
Oh, that's too long.
And they've released this
What a
poster.
hell.
Oh, okay. It's just a guy.
Very Prince of Persia.
Oh,
maybe.
yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
And do you think coming off maybe a positive reception from Ms. Marvel?
Yeah,
There's that
potentially.
kind of,
What superhero representation in Southeast Asia?
Exactly, yeah, just a different kind of culture that we're not
South Asia,
so
yeah.
used to in superhero films in general.
Yeah.
So
Did it say it was kind of superhero, or is that? Just,
Yeah. It is. I think it is a superhero story, but it's kind of like
Cool.
not your usual superheroes. What it keeps saying, whatever that means.
From that artwork, the
Yeah.
cover, it did seem a bit like Winter Soldier.
Oh, yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
I can
thing,
see.
with the
Yeah.
flowing hair, quite muscly.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what these ones I mentioned before are like. It's that
Yeah.
kind of vibe. So yeah, if it's again anything like that, yeah, fun. We'll be waiting over a year. Well, no, over a year. Just it feels like about a year, but it's about
It's
6
like-
months. isn't
Yeah,
it, really?
6 months.
It feels like a year.
Our lives are flying past.
We'll
our
definitely
eyes.
definitely be covering that though when that comes out. Hopefully, it gets a release here as well as there.
If not, I'm sure we'll manage
Yeah.
it, like Project Wolf Hunting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Did you have any other project
No,
news?
that is project news for the week, which means we can go into our main topic. So,
yes,
Sam knows what the report's going to be on. The listeners know what the report's going to be on. I know what the report's going to be on.
That's good.
Hamish, do you want to have a guess of what you think the report's going to be on?
Is it on the difference between flying animals and walking animals?
I think you might have misunderstood the aim of this podcast.
Projects flying versus walking.
I mean, I'd be up for that, whatever that
is. It is an apt timing. We've been building up to it for the last few weeks. It is the Manhattan Project.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a good shout. Love it.
Yeah. Do you know much about the Manhattan Project?
A bit, but I'm not going to say how much just because I don't want to embarrass myself.
No, that's right. And I don't know that much, so I don't want you to spoil it for me quite yet. So I appreciate it.
All about Nazis.
So in the last few weeks, apart from our 100th episode, we've been building up to the release of Oppenheimer by doing stuff with Manhattan Project in the title. So we did an episode of The King of Queens.
Yes.
We did a 1986 film called The Manhattan Project, and we did an episode of Ugly Betty called The Manhattan Project, and then we read the Manhattan Project's
comic, yes.
Which is like an alternate history.
Yes.
Covering all bases, really, aren't you?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
We've learnt more from some than others.
Yes.
Sam, do you want to summarise what we've learnt so far?
From the King of Queens episode, we basically just learned that Manhattan is a place in New York. We weren't sure how... We're going with the blank slate. We don't know how that ties into the project.
You always need a background. Go on.
Exactly. And that hopefully it's set against the background of Manhattan.
Boom.
Hopefully. Otherwise,
you'll be surprised about how little Manhattan comes
up
in this report.
I know that much, but I'm playing the part of the, the dumbfounded blank slate brain.
You don't need to play that, bro.
I just bashed my head while I nodded, so maybe... what do we watch next?
The Manhattan Project.
The film was about a teenager who was in the 80s who was trying to show off how much scientific knowledge he had, and he built his own nuclear bomb for some reason. And I was really frustrated because I was like, why would you build a bomb? It's really annoying. And he got in trouble with the authorities, of course, and John Lithgow was chasing him around and stuff. But yeah, we learned like very vague bits about the fact that you can use certain cores to make a bomb. There was lots of montages, but not much explaining. So visually, I think
they
probably don't want to explain too much.
Well, exactly, because you might get a whole load of
I listened
Johnny's or whatever.
I listened back to the episode recently. We talked about how the bomb stopped, and it was a reference to the first test bomb. It had the date on it as the time. It was
right.
Like, we got it wrong. We said the wrong date.
Yeah, no,
I know that now.
It's the thought that counts, though. Come on.
We knew that it was a reference to it.
Yeah.
Then Ugly Betty, we didn't learn much more than King of Queens.
No.
More just that Manhattan was a place. I think that's when we really knew a bit more about Manhattan.
Yeah.
You can get an apartment there. There might be a sexy guy who plays guitar who lives next door to you. You might get conned into buying renting an apartment that's a bit shit.
I wonder if that happened to Oppenheimer.
I mean, you shouldn't be wondering because you're the one who's done the research. And then we read the comic.
Yeah, so it was an alternate history. So Oppenheimer was in it, Einstein was in it, some other key characters were in it. But because it's an alternate history, it was like, how much is this is true and how much is it then twist in history?
And it was quite clearly like it started with Oppenheimer had an evil twin.
Okay.
So it was straight from the back. It was like it was a bit silly, and he ended up being like a serial killer who, spoilers for the first issue of it, replaces Oppenheimer and is the one who carries on his work. So it's kind of sowing the seed. There's this evil guy at the forefront of, and also the projects themselves.
A big part of that is like the atomic bomb is just kind of the face of it. They're also doing like aliens and portals and bringing back people from the dead.
Yeah,
AI technology.
Yeah. So it was fun,
but it's hard to know what we learned.
I think you said some of the figures you recognise the names.
Yeah,
they used the same scientists, but made them into like Avengers, basically.
Off the top of my head, there's like 5 or 6 people from that comic that will come up in this report.
Cool.
Including Oppenheimer, believe it or not.
Yeah, you'd hope so.
You surprised us.
But yeah, so we kind of came into this with we're coming into this with a pretty bare knowledge, I would
low
say.
base, yeah.
Yeah. So excited to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. It's a massively historic kind of key
Yeah,
moment.
I remember when we first decided to like do reports, I was like, the two that stood out to me that I wanted to do was this and MK Ultra.
Nice.
I was like,
And I'm here again for it.
Yeah.
MK Ultra.
you're
No,
the person who comes
yeah.
to them. But yeah, Manhattan Project. I think because Oppenheimer's come out, it's kind of fast forwarded down our plan a bit, and I was like, shit.
And it timed just after the film comes out. When at time of recording, none of us have seen the film. It comes out tomorrow.
Day after tomorrow at time of recording.
Yeah. Are you excited to see the film, Hamish?
Yeah, very much so. Well, mainly just because I love Cillian Murphy.
Yeah,
but also, because the film should be, by all accounts, a great film.
Been planning with a couple of people the Oppenheimer Barbie double bill that I'm planning on Saturday.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I haven't planned any particular thing, so I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, I'll probably see both of them the same day.
Who are you going dressed as, Barbie or Oppenheimer?
I'm actually going to go dressed as Ken.
Okay, no, fair enough. Yeah.
Fair.
I can see the resemblance.
I'm going to go as Ken for Oppenheimer, and then we're going to go as a nuclear bomb for Barbie.
You walk in, go, I'm in the wrong place.
Just stick loads of mushrooms all over me. Be like, get it.
Yeah.
So before we get into it,
I actually don't get it because I don't know anything about this topic at all.
I got a question to ask you before we get into it. So the British nuclear project began earlier than the Manhattan Project, but was later absolved by its American counterpart. What was the British project called? I do have multiple choice.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it A, tube alloys? Is it B, the Epsom project? Is it C, Harrogate? Or is it D, the King Arthur project?
C, Harrogate. Lock in my answer.
Whoa,
Is that, okay.
I don't know.
I mean, I'd like to believe it's the King Arthur project. I don't know why that's really working. That's really working for me.
I mean, it's probably the coolest name.
It's definitely the coolest one. I don't think it would just be Harrogate, but that seems like a weird one to pick. I'm gonna go King Arthur. I'm not.
You going King Arthur?
I'd like A because it's a boring name, which would work well because you want to have a fancy project and you just call it the toilet brush, something like that. That's a good way to hide it. What spy is going to look for a? And
the Epsom project is a good alternative to Manhattan Project.
But I think it's too close to Manhattan Project. So you wouldn't want to go for it because it sounds too similar to what Manhattan Project.
I enjoy this because I made 3 of them up myself. So.
You've done very well.
So this discussion,
all these thoughts have come through your head already.
We did a lot of quiz questions. We did 25 each last episode. So practice doing the false options there.
I'm gonna lock in C, Harrogate
and King Arthur. The answer is actually A, tube alloys.
Well done to MI5 or whoever, or SIS or whoever it was at the time. That is, good name.
I had 3 options, and I was like, I should do one that's just a place name. And the first place that came to my head was Harrogate, and I was like,
when thinking about nuclear waste.
Yeah, well, I mean, why not? So the Manhattan Project was a research and development undertaking during World War II to produce the first nuclear weapon. It was under the direction of Major General Leslie Groves of the US Army Corps of Engineers, with nuclear physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer leading the design of the actual bomb. To give a bit of context, I'd hope you to know this bit that I'm about to say, but for the listeners that may not have any idea of what's going on the 3rd of September 1939, Britain and France declared war on Nazi Germany in response to the invasion of Poland.
Now, that is a twist I did not expect.
Wait, what?
Well, yeah. Over the next 2 years, Europe would see brutal invasions, bombings, and dogfights. On the 7th of December 1941, in an attempt to further establish their control over the Pacific, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and the US was forced to join the war. Over the next 4 years, the UK, the US, and the USSR would turn the tide on Nazi-controlled Europe and force their surrender. Meanwhile, the US would continue a brutal fight in the Pacific Theatre until the beginning of August 1945, when a new weapon would be introduced.
Dun, dun, dun!
I wonder what weapon it is.
I know,
Do you think
right?
maybe it's like a a big sword.
Well, it's the Allied tube, isn't it?
Ah, big
That's what it
tube.
is,
Yeah. A British tube, of course. Yeah. Is that where we got the name of the tube? Oh my god! It's all coming together, boys. It's all coming together.
Before we delve into story, I want to give you a bit of background on our two main characters in this, who we previously mentioned, Leslie Groves and J. Robert Oppenheimer. First of all, Leslie Groves, born on the 17th of August, 1896. Making him just 48 at the end of the war. He was the son of an army chaplain, so he spent most of his childhood in military bases. After completing high school, he enrolled at University of Washington, hoping to get an appointment from the US Military Academy. He received a nomination from President Woodrow Wilson to join, but failed the entrance exam.
Oh dear.
It's an ongoing thing with Leslie Groves, is that he really likes the military, but he's not the brightest. 2 years later, he attempted it again and was accepted. He started the academy in June 1916, and due to the American declaration of war in Germany in April 1917, his class was shortened and he graduated on the 1st of November 1918, 10 days before the end of the war. So obviously, he didn't go and fight.
Right.
Over the next few years, he would receive several promotions within the army, including postings in Hawaii and Nicaragua, during which he received the Nicaraguan Presidential Medal of Merit after taking over responsibility for the water supply following the 1931 Nicaragua earthquake.
Oh.
So he's competent. He can get things done.
Yeah.
By 1940, Leslie Groves was a major and was given command of the construction of barracks for the expected upcoming national mobilization. The program was failing when he took it over, and Groves' adaptation made the project a success, and we'd soon be given the task of heading another construction project, the Pentagon.
Oh, I think I've heard of that one.
Yeah, maybe it's the one. I think it's got like 6 or 7 sides.
Yeah.
Isn't it about worshipping the devil or something like that? I think.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. The 6 stars of the devil.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
666. Yeah, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Groves would work 7 days a week and was quoted as saying he was hoping to get a war theatre so he could find a little peace.
That's ironic, isn't it?
So yeah, he's basically lived his entire life in the military. He's in his 40s now, and he's never been to war or seen combat.
Right,
I think that plays on his mind a lot.
He wants to make his mark on the world. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But he's proven that he can get shit done.
Yeah.
He's a
reliable
person, yeah. In 1942, he was approached by the Chief of the Army Forces, Brehon Somervell, and was informed that the Secretary of War had selected him with the president's approval to lead a very important assignment that would win the war. Groves was soon disappointed to find out it was not a combat assignment.
But to be fair, what a letter to get, though. From like a general of the army.
The chief of the army, the secretary of war, and the president being like, we want you.
They kind of buried the lead a little bit there on that one as well.
Yeah.
And God himself. Like, okay, cool. I'm not actually comparing those two, of course.
No, that is exactly what you said, and it's been recorded.
I mean, neither of them are real in my mind. So.
Whoa. So that sets the scene for Leslie Groves. Our other central character is Julius Robert Oppenheimer, commonly known as Robert Oppenheimer. He was born
That's
on the
a shame.
Yeah.
I love the first name Julius, and to drop it for Robert seems a little bit poor form.
Maybe he's trying to be like more American kind of, straight American kind of.
About salt of the earth kind of Robert rather than
Roberts.
Yeah.
And Bob.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Bobbenheimer.
Why has nobody called him Bobbenheimer? I did read that like a lot of his like students and friends nicknamed him Oppie. Like they called him Oppie.
I don't love that.
I'm all about Bobbenheimer.
Bobbenheimer. Yeah,
Bobbenheimer.
Okay, well.
So he was born on the 22nd of April 1904 to a non-practicing Jewish family. His father, Julius Oppenheimer, which is probably why he went by.
That makes sense,
moved to America from Prussia with no money and no English, but within a decade was an executive at a textile company and would have an art collection, including works from Picasso and Van Gogh.
Wow. He did well.
So
that's not bad.
That's done pretty well for himself in a short amount of time.
Okay.
Considering he had no English.
Yeah, he must have had some skills in other areas then.
Yeah, just a good businessman, I imagine. Robert Oppenheimer was an excellent student growing up and graduated from Harvard University in 1925, studying chemistry, before going to Cambridge University. He initially struggled as he wasn't great at laboratory work and preferred theoretical physics. During these years, his friends described him as a chain smoker who often neglected to eat during periods of intense thought and often self-destructive tendencies, and often had bouts of depression.
Yeah, the few photos that I've seen of him, he looks
always smoking,
very skinny. So both of those things
not a cheery,
and has a bit of a face like a smacked ass. So all of those things working.
He would go on to receive a doctorate in philosophy at the University of Göttingen, where he became friends with Werner Heisenberg, who people would know as
inspiration for
Breaking Bad. Who would also later lead the Nazi program on nuclear weapons. And another friend was Enrico Fermi, who comes up a few times in this. So he's a name worth remembering.
I remember him from the comic.
Yes, I can't
where
remember.
he was like a Spock kind of looking guy.
Was he the Spock guy, right?
Yeah, Italian guy, right?
Yeah. Oppenheimer would teach at several universities throughout his 20s, including Harvard, Caltech, and Berkeley. So pretty good. He's not even 30 teaching at those universities, and was a well-liked and inspirational teacher. During this time, he fell out with a close friend, Linus Pauling, who believed Oppenheimer was becoming too close to his wife.
To his own wife, I was thinking.
Yeah.
Damn it, I've got to stop getting close to my wife.
No, that's another thing comes up about Oppenheimer.
He's a bit of a player.
He's a bit of a player. He made several significant discoveries in the 1930s, as well as predicting the existence of neutron stars and black holes.
Cool.
So an all-rounder when it comes to science, and pretty good at lots of things.
Well, not lab work though,
but not lab work.
At first, anyway.
Ironically. In the late 1930s, Oppenheimer became increasingly interested in politics, donating and raising money to support Jewish scientists in Germany and Republicans in the Spanish Civil War. Although he never joined the Communist Party of the USA, he was close friends with many, many members, including his brother, Frank Oppenheimer.
Right.
So in the comic, it mentioned that his brother's a communist. That was a real thing.
Yes, they're talking about that brother and not... That must be the younger brother. Yes, okay, yeah.
He had dated Jean Tatlock, who wrote for the communist newspaper, and later married Kitty Poonin, who was a former Communist Party member.
I'm sorry, that name. Kitty Poonin.
It may be Puning.
With a G on the end.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think if he'd actually been a member of the Communist Party, he would have been allowed on the Manhattan Project?
Well, we'll have to see.
I mean, if they get any other communists on there, then we know.
I'll mention some people that come up in this. I specifically added them in there because I looked at the cast for Oppenheimer and I was like, they're going to show up in that, so I'll put them in there.
He's not just a pretty face.
So him and Kitty would only be married for a few months. And then divorced, but were later found sleeping together again whilst Kitty's new husband was away travelling. So, and then they got remarried.
Right.
But that was a rocky marriage because he rekindled his affair with Jean Tatlock, his ex-girlfriend. So there's lots of...
I'm looking forward to this part of the film. This will be the bit with the full frontal nudity that was reported recently.
But both those women are in the film,
yes.
So...
Yes! Now I'm definitely seeing it.
In March 1941, the FBI opened a file on Oppenheimer to keep track of any communist activity. Just 18 months later, however, Leslie Groves approached Oppenheimer to head the Manhattan Project's secret weapons laboratory. Ooh. So that is old Robbie, old Bobbenheimer.
Bobbenheimer, that's it. I'd forgotten the name
so
already.
That's our two main characters. Oppenheimer, a bit of a weird but popular guy who maybe can't keep his hands to himself, but a brilliant scientist. And Leslie Groves, who's not an academic, but can get things done as a military man.
Would you say that Leslie Groves feels like he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder that he needs to prove himself?
Yeah,
potentially. That's the kind of you get at Hamish.
It came up a lot that he wanted to go and fight, and I think the fact that he never made it to the First World War, then got stationed to like relief stuff. When
he's got to have daddy issues. There's got to be something.
Well, they mentioned his dad was an army preacher or
a chaplain.
Yeah.
And they travelled around loads as well to go to different barracks and stuff.
I found it interesting about the communist stuff with Oppenheimer and the FBI opening a file on him and kind of going through all that process on a American citizen.
Yeah.
But then, like, a few years later, allowing... like, or funding Nazis to come over and giving them well-paid jobs.
I mean,
like, what was it, Operation Paperclip or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
just
if anything about post-war America, if you learn anything from post-war America, it's that communists bad, Nazis not as bad. Like Nazis
bizarre.
okay, but communists is really bad.
It's mental.
So let's get into the crux of the story. It starts on the 2nd of August, 1939. So early days of the war, before America were into it. It's before the wars actually started. But Hungarian physicist Leo Szilard authored a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt advising him to start funding research into nuclear fission as a weapon as nuclear fission as a weapon, as Germany might be doing the same. The letter was also signed off by Albert Einstein. So they're like, look, Germans might be doing this, so maybe you should start doing it as well.
Was Einstein at the time the renowned physicist that we know him as now? Or,
yes, but maybe not quite on the same level, but
no.
particularly in the science world, he was
Someone
one of the top dogs.
Yeah.
I think if you had a passing interest in science, you would have known who Einstein was.
He's not just a crazy guy with big hair.
No, not yet.
not just. No.
Szilard was actually proven right that Germany had begun researching nuclear fission as a weapon, but they'd made very slow progress due to the mass exodus of leading German scientists and would actually never get close to building a bomb. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot by discriminating against people that could help them.
But I do remember, though, it was some fact that was like, so a quarter of 250,000 people worked on the Oppenheimer or the Manhattan Project. Kind of, if you look as like total kind of people, not just like the actual scientists themselves. And there was a tiny proportion that were actually German. It was only like 100 or so that were actually German.
We get, obviously, we mentioned in the comic Werner von Braun, who was dubbed the father of rocket science.
Yeah, because
and he was a Nazi.
I wasn't sure whether that was during, because in the comic that's prior. Well, that's prior to the launch of to the dropping of the bomb.
Yeah, in reality, it was post-war that he was.
Operation Paperclip, to my knowledge, didn't really kick in until after the war or the closing days of the war, because the Germans were. And in
the comic, I think they portray it as they've got Europe on its kind of heels or whatever, knees, and then they kind of go in and grab Werner and take him out, kind of thing. In response to the letter, President Roosevelt organised an advisory committee on uranium to investigate the issue raised by the letter.
Whose anium?
Uranium.
I don't think I've ever heard that one before.
Oh, it's a classic Minecraft joke. Come on.
That really got you.
It's the first thing that's made me laugh today. So.
This doesn't get cheerier. So
no, I'm finding the moments. You know.
Yeah. Keep the jokes going, because otherwise it'll be solemn.
Wait until we start talking about the planets, and there's a good similar joke.
That one I can see coming.
Jupiter.
Jupiter.
I see what you mean. Nice.
Yeah, we found it.
Anyway, Lyman Briggs was asked to head this meeting on investigating uranium, which was
the one who sent the letter.
No, he was Roosevelt's man.
Right.
But the meeting was attended by Leo Szilard, and Edward Teller, another prominent physicist at the time. A lot of the scientists I mentioned this have won a Nobel Prize, so like they're literally the elite of the elite. The committee reported to Roosevelt that uranium would provide a possible source of bombs with destructiveness vastly greater than anything now known. So they're like, this could be something. In February 1940, the US Navy awarded $6,000 to Enrico Fermi and Leo Szilard at Columbia University in funding, most of which was spent on purchasing graphite, And then the team, including Fermi and Szilard, created the first nuclear fission reaction in the Americas.
I do remember learning about this. I think in physics, probably. I remember learning something about the graphite, or it may have been. I don't know. Yeah, I remember something about graphite at some point, and that rings about.
Yeah, it's interesting that Leo Szilard, who's the one was like, we need to start doing this.
Yeah,
was the guy who did the first nuclear fission.
Like, okay, now do it. Yeah.
With Enrico Fermi, who's come up again.
I did have a quick Google and saw that 6,000 USD is now 100 grand, which seems pretty measly sum to be saying, okay, we want you to create the bomb. Here's 100 grand. Let's see what you can do.
Some of the money does get wild in here, even their terms. And you look at it in modern money, and you're like, holy fuck.
That was just to get the first reaction.
Yeah, that was
going,
just to see if they could do nuclear fission, and they were like, yeah, we can.
A seed investment kind of thing, is it?
The following years, they started doing some stuff. The following year, an Australian physicist, Mark Oliphant, who'd been working with the British, flew to America to see where they were at with their nuclear stuff, and discovered that the data set up by the Maud Committee, who was the British group researching atomic weapons and nuclear stuff, their data had not reached key American physicists. And he was like, they know fuck all compared to the British. Like, why is this? Why are they not
how it always should have been.
He met with this uranium committee and visited famous physicists at Berkeley. And he spoke to Ernest Lawrence, who's another big physicist. And Lawrence was like, oh, what you're saying is really interesting, and started his own research into uranium. He then spoke to other physicists, and they were like, oh, this seems interesting. So the first time key American physicists were now aware of the power of an atomic bomb. And you've got kind of the key physicist community talking about this potential.
So you've got the Australian man to thank for that then.
Yeah, Mark Oliphant.
Crikey.
No relation to Timothy Oliphant.
No. Well, you never know.
Meanwhile, on the 30th of August 1941, Winston Churchill approved tube alloys, a British program to develop nuclear weapons.
That sounds familiar, Hamish, right?
If only we'd known that beforehand, we would have got a bloody quiz right.
Yeah, now we're both 0 for 0 on this one.
yeah.
Well, maybe
how many more questions can we?
I can make up some questions.
Yeah, please.
2 months after tube alloys was set up, President Roosevelt approved the atomic program in America after he convened with a meeting with Vannevar Bush, who's the head of the U.S. Office for Scientific Research.
Is that going to be the Bushes?
No, I looked it up and I thought it might be, but unrelated Bush.
Not
different Bush.
Political, what is it called? Like a dynasty.
Yeah. But he comes up a few times and he's in the film. So, but they set up a meeting that was a group, rather, that was Roosevelt, Bush, Vice President Henry Wallace, Secretary of War Henry Stimson, and the Chief of the Staff of the Army, General George Marshall. They came together and were like, right, let's plan out this nuclear program. They agreed to coordinate their effort with the British, and Roosevelt agreed with Churchill that they would correspond on their atomic plans. Meanwhile, Robert Oppenheimer, a leading theoretical physicist, was asked to take over research into fast neutron calculations, the key to calculations of critical mass and weapon detonations, from a guy called Gregory Bright, who'd quit in May 1942 because of concerns over lax operational security.
So if he hadn't given up, we could have had a film called Bright.
Yeah.
Which wasn't that the Will Smith film about orcs or cops or whatever?
That's a good point, yeah.
So, a bit of a combo.
Spelled differently, but yeah.
Well, and also, you talk about like this big state secret kind of.
Yeah, it really made me laugh.
It does not sound like a state secret. You've got any old person with a Nobel Prize just
you got to walk up, show your medal, and then you go straight.
What have you got a Nobel Prize for?
Probably not peace.
Exactly.
Well, no, if it was from about 5 years before, it might have been.
Yeah. But yeah, like,
and what about literature?
Exactly. Yeah,
they're all medals.
I'm actually really good at Shakespeare, but can I get in on this atomic bomb stuff?
The children's poet laureates there.
Oppenheimer and Enrico Fermi, who was working more closely with the government, had regular meetings where they discussed how this fission bomb, if it was actually possible. And by July 1942, they'd concluded that theoretically it was possible to create this bomb.
Right.
So 1942.
And so Fermi's the one who made the first, or co-made the first reactor or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, with
So
Scylla.
With Szilard. Yeah.
Szilard, yeah.
Szilard.
Scylla blank.
Scylla Black, yeah.
Szilard Bright.
So now that they decided that a fission bomb was possible, they wanted to see if anything else like that was possible. Edward Teller, who came up previously, pushed for the idea of a more powerful bomb known as the Super. These days we know it as a hydrogen bomb.
Oh, wow.
So even that early, he was like, how about we do this instead?
Right.
Teller proposed scheme after scheme, but each one was refused. They were like, no, we want to stick with this nuclear bomb. The fusion idea was put aside to concentrate on producing fission bombs. Teller also raised speculative possibility that an atomic bomb might ignite the atmosphere because of a hypothetical fusion reaction of nitrogen nuclei. So there was an actual fear, like, if we set this off, like, the whole of Earth's atmosphere might set alight.
I feel like I've heard that before, and I don't know if you go into it more, but there's something about they didn't know if the chain reaction would ever stop. Is that a separate thing?
That's essentially, I don't go into it further, but that's essentially it. They thought chain reaction would just keep on going.
It does seem to be like a theme with scientific advancement. It's, well, we actually don't 100% know what's going to happen. So
there's only one way
do
to
it
find
anyway?
out?
Yeah, it's like
I guess it depends on
collider.
It depends on the scale of it. Like, I guess the scale just tends to go up over time, doesn't it? So eventually it will be.
It's fine if you're like a biologist, but these chemists and physicists are way too dangerous.
You say it's fine. I mean, if COVID-19 is anything to go by.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah,
because there were. I mean, I'm not, backing any particular theories, but wasn't there somebody who came out recently and was like, there is evidence of it coming from a lab? I didn't read about it too much.
I think that I definitely remember seeing something
like fairly recently, the last couple of months. I know it was speculated a while back,
but I do also read a lot of Reddit, so that's.
I thought you were going to say right-wing newspapers.
Well,
I do read a lot of Reddit. You're still on Reddit then, even after, it's gone a bit.
Yeah.
But it's still working for me somehow, even though Reddit is fun, obviously got shut down, but it still works. So I'm still using it.
I use it in the browser. I don't bother using the app.
Oh,
and
he's
it's still
a browser boy.
Yeah.
Browser boy.
It's lovely. God.
Yeah, I mean, I've still got an account. I just don't. I think I've got 2 accounts. I've got a podcast one as well, which I've barely used.
So subscribe to. No.
We do have a Project Reddit, but it hasn't been updated in about 80 episodes.
And whose fault is that, Lewis?
So anyway, now that they kind of discussed what bombs were possible, they actually started setting up this project to further research it. And it was going to be an army project because, by this point, they're they are at war at this point. So
the idea was floated prior, and then it's kind of tipped over.
Now that they know, or the scientists have said, theoretically, we can create this bomb.
Yeah.
The army have been like, right, let's start working on it then.
But it was under the impression that, I'm assuming it was under the impression that war was coming because it was done off.
They said it was Germany.
Yeah, Germany were doing their own atomic research.
That's what kind of started it. By the time that kind of Oppenheimer and Fermi have concluded that this can happen, it's July 1942. They've been in the war for 7 or 8 months now, so even though they haven't really done anything at this point, the war effort is picking up. So
the best way to stop someone using an atomic bomb is to have an atomic bomb yourself.
Precisely. So General George Marshall was to head the Army's part of the project from June 1942. He created a liaison office in Washington, D.C., but established his headquarters on the 18th floor of 270 Broadway in New York, where he would draw on administrative support from the Corps of Engineers North Atlantic Division. Because most of the tasks involved construction, Marshall worked in cooperation with the head of the Corps of Engineers Construction Division, Major General Thomas Robbins, and his deputy, Colonel Leslie Groves. He's where he first comes in. Marshall and Robbins decided to call the project the Department of Substitute Materials, but Leslie Groves said, that will draw too much attention. Obviously. Since engineered districts normally carried the name of the city where they were located, Marshall and Groves agreed to name the Army's component of the project after the Manhattan District, hence the name, the Manhattan Project.
Okay.
So it's all because Marshall's office was there and Groves was like, that's a dumb name, let's go with this. Leslie Groves was then given leadership of the program on the 17th of September 1942 as Vannevar Bush, who's like the president's guy overlooking all of this, basically. If there was a little chart, he's on the top just below the president. He believed that George Marshall was too weak and ineffective. He was like, I need a man that gets things done. Saw what Groves had done with the Pentagon and the barracks and was like, he's my man, and got him in. One of Groves's early problems was finding a director for Project Y, the group that would design and build the bomb. With the current laboratory heads already overworked, Groves had to look elsewhere and was recommended a leading physicist who was already familiar with bomb designs, J. Robert Oppenheimer.
I recognise him.
I thought it was called Bobbenheimer.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I mistyped it. J. Bobbenheimer.
J. Bobbenheimer.
Groves had his concerns, though. Oppenheimer had never won a Nobel Prize, like all the current lab heads and most of the people he was working with, and had several links to the Communist Party.
Yeah.
And
I
he was
see
like,
that bit being a problem for me.
yeah. However, upon meeting him, Groves was impressed by Oppenheimer's understanding of what was required to succeed on the project, and he knew he'd need a scientist who was an expert in physics, chemistry, and engineering, and soon waived the security requirements to appoint Oppenheimer as the head of Project Y of design of the bomb.
Did he give him a Nobel Prize as well, just lying around in the back of the office?
Just someone else's.
I do find it funny, though, that, like, they couldn't find anyone who was like qualified enough, so he was like, I don't like this guy. But because Groves isn't an academic man, he meets someone that talks science to him, and he's like, he must be a genius.
I like this guy.
They did get on, though. They had a great working relationship. You can see tons of pictures of those two working together. They spearhead this project together as kind of a duo. So I think Groves was happy with his decision. The next task was to find a location to research and build the bomb. And Groves settled on an abandoned school, Los Alamos, on Oppenheimer's recommendation, located near a ranch that Oppenheimer owned in New Mexico.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah, it was just an abandoned school, and they built a load of buildings with it and reused some of the buildings. And for the most part, this team are named Los Alamos after the school.
Right.
As Los Alamos was initially supposed to be a military laboratory, Oppenheimer and other researchers were commissioned into the army. Oppenheimer went so far as to order himself a lieutenant colonel's uniform and take the army physical test, which he failed because he's a skinny chain smoker.
I was going to say he doesn't eat enough, and he's depressed, although that probably doesn't show up.
The other scientists said they didn't want to be joined to the army, so it was actually made a University of California, Berkeley project under funding from the government, so they could work on it without being part of the army.
It's interesting you say, yes, I'm happy to make a weapon of mass destruction, but I do not want to be part of the army.
Yeah, I quite like how keen Oppenheimer was to be part of the army.
Yeah, he's got himself a uniform.
Jumping jacks straight away.
Oppenheimer and his colleagues spent the first year of their research understanding how uranium and plutonium could be used to set off the required detonation. In 1943, they completed their first bomb design, the Thin Man. So if you look at pictures, as you can imagine, kind of a long, thin, like tube with a cap on the end and kind of the pointy bits. A lot of these bombs look like, this is where we get the stereotypes of bombs from.
Right.
But it's a long, thin man. It was a long tube, and the idea was to shoot one part of plutonium in one side of the bomb at a piece of plutonium at the other side of the bomb to create a nuclear explosion. This plan was cancelled when they received their first shipment of plutonium and realised it was far more reactive than their theoretical plans. And they were like, this is too chaotic. We can't control this plutonium.
So literally one bit at the back and one bit at the front, and it kind of crashes into each other. Yeah, that's pretty.
Which is why it was long and thin, I guess.
Yeah.
Among the leading scientists working on this project at the time were 25-year-old Richard Feynman, who would go on to win the Nobel Prize for Physics, Niels Bohr, who had previously won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1922, and what correct's done me there? What was his name? Carlos Karl Fuchs, who later confessed to passing information to the Soviets from 1942 to 1949. So there was a lot of espionage going on here as well. The Soviets had a few men in this. He was the most notable one. Niels Bohr had escaped Nazi persecution and was part of the British team sent to help on the Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer credited Bohr as being key to keeping the younger scientists, such as Richard Feynman, working at their best due to his experience and approachability.
Right, okay.
Niels Bohr and...
Not like a real taskmaster then.
No.
He's just like a cool guy.
Yeah.
Also, he thought he was a terrible scientist. You're really bad scientist, but you're great with people, so we'll keep you on board.
I read that Niels Bohr and Richard Feynman became really good friends because Niels Bohr had won the Nobel Prize in 1922. All the other kind of young scientists, like, wouldn't talk to him and like wouldn't disagree with him for anything because they were just like in awe. Yeah. Whereas Richard Feynman, like if he disagreed, would tell him, and he was like really like that. He was like, "Oh, I've actually got someone who I can talk to."
Treating him like a normal person.
Yeah. The research did not go without incident though. 24-year-old Harry Daghlian, who came from the comic, accidentally dropped a plutonium core, which made it go supercritical. And the irradiation would kill Daghlian a month later.
This is the demon core, isn't it?
Yeah, he came up in the comic. A similar incident would kill Louis Slotin soon after with the same plutonium core.
Wow.
So
I think that's when it became known as the demon core after it killed two people. In the comic, Hamish, when you first meet the group of scientists, one of them kind of looks like a kind of Ghost Rider kind of guy. He's got a glowing green skull head contained within a suit. And he is this
Harry
Daghlian. In this version, it instead gave him immortality. So it's a pretty good deal.
That's worked out quite well.
He did die, but it's
very, very quickly afterwards.
Well, a month of slowly dying of plutonium radiation.
I've heard about the story. It's if either of you have seen the Chernobyl series, you know. It's a pretty awful way to go, any kind of irradiation.
And the new Litvinenko with David Tennant.
I've never seen that.
It's good. Yeah, highly recommend it.
I'll check that out. At this point of the war, there was considerable anxiety amongst the scientists that the Germans might be making faster progress on atomic weapons than they were. In a letter dated 25th of May 1943, Oppenheimer responded to a proposal by Enrico Fermi to use radioactive materials to poison German food supplies. They're looking for some alternatives. Oppenheimer asked Fermi...
rather than going through with the whole thing, they're just like, we'll just use what we've got. And
why don't we just shoot them instead of bombing them?
I think some of it was like, if they're really far ahead of us with these plans, we might need to have a quicker alternative.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer asked Fermi...
Big swords.
What?
Big swords.
Big swords. Big swords.
Maybe make it out of plutonium. Crash it down onto...
Yeah, there is an ongoing thing. If this is at the time, there was only 4 widely known uranium reserves on Earth.
Right.
Oh, really?
And 3 of them were under control by the Allies. And 1 was in like German Africa. So they had a lot more supply than the Germans. But
then surely it doesn't take very much to create a nuclear bomb.
You don't need a lot. Oppenheimer asked Fermi whether he could produce enough strontium, which is a thing you can make from it, without letting too many in on the secret. Oppenheimer continued, I think we should not attempt a plan unless we can poison food sufficient to kill 500,000 men.
So one of the things I do know, and I'm not going to skip too much, is that there's certain levels of, maybe reprehension towards what is done later in this. And some of that comes from Oppenheimer himself. There's certain quotes that I'm sure will come up. But the way that I've always seen it is that maybe for some reason he was not clueless, but not fully appreciating the death toll that could happen. But here he's saying, we can't do it unless we're going to kill 500,000 people.
If you're going to do it properly.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think he's a very complex man. There's also there's stuff that comes up. I don't know if I've put it in later, where he would say stuff or repeat stuff that turned out not to be true completely, or to like get a reaction out of who he's talking to because of his self-destructive, depressive type. He wanted to see. He would say random. So he may have said that. He may have just been like,
And also, I suppose,
intrusive thought kind
if
of
he's
thing.
saying men specifically, if that is the reliable quote, he may have been thinking like army supplies. Whereas what ends up happening is more of a wide scale thing.
So they had the Thin Man bomb. They also created an alternative plan, which was the idea of an implosion bomb. So the implosion would use explosives to crush a subcritical sphere of fissile material into smaller and denser form. When the fissile atoms are packed closer together, the rate of neurons capture increases and the mass becomes a critical mass. Wow. So the idea is to blow them together until it becomes so dense it sets off.
Right. Okay.
I did try to look in some of the science behind it.
Oh, it's so difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. I was imagining like something from a game where you throw it and it like sucks everything in. And I was like, wow.
I think that's kind of like,
I guess it sucks into a degree
how it kind of works. Yeah. It's not sucking in as much force in it. But yeah, I was going to do a whole bit on the science, and I was like, nah, I'd have to learn it to do it.
And so many things that you could say incorrectly as well in terms of like pronunciation of words.
Yeah, I'm probably sure I got some of that wrong. I was really focusing on that. But they had been working on this implosion idea as well as the Thin Man. By August 1944, Oppenheimer was working on his design of an implosion bomb, the Fat Man. So this is when you like draw a bomb as like a kid or something, and the big circle with the pointy bit of thing, it looks just like that.
Yeah.
And did they wrote on the outside as well and stuff like that when they dropped them over Hiroshima?
Getting ahead of yourself.
Sorry, no spoilers.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I've got a picture of Fat Man, a replica of Fat Man here.
Yeah,
it's right here.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't. They probably wouldn't have. They probably wouldn't have the photo of it. The real one.
Yeah, unless they took. A picture
that's a good point. Yeah, beforehand. Yeah.
But as uranium was easier to work with plutonium, the team created an updated version of the Thin Man using uranium, so it's more easier to use, and they codenamed this Little Boy. So you've got these two main bombs they're working on now, Fat Man and Little Boy.
Nice.
I was expecting one of you to say something inappropriate then.
I was going to say it's just what you two should call your podcast.
Wow.
No, we're already called Two Ugly Boys in the Basement.
Yeah. So. It's the Kevin Spacey trial, isn't it?
What, Fat Man and Little Boy?
Yeah, nice. Like that.
At its peak, the Manhattan Project employed nearly 130,000 people and cost, across the whole thing, $2 billion. Which is $24 billion in today's money on a secret project. 90% of the cost...
What was it?
90% of the cost was to build factories and produce material that can sustain a nuclear reaction. So we kind of get into the crux of the thing here. They've got their bomb designs, and now the next step will be putting it into action.
Actually doing all the bits.
So... Thoughts so far?
Yeah, it's amazing, really. And what I kind of find interesting is that they thought they were in a race the whole time.
Yeah.
But they weren't.
No,
not in the same way
Germans never got close.
Yeah.
Like Heisenberg was head of their program, and obviously he was famous for other things before and after the war. And he said they just didn't have the material or the scientists to do it. They've got fucking Nobel Prize winner every fucking corner of this place.
Yeah, the Avengers of scientists.
Literally against
Baron
Zemo.
But that is interesting. Like Hamish was saying, that like you'd constantly have this fear that you're on this timeline that they could have a nuclear bomb dropped on them at any minute. You know, it'd be somewhere in the back of your mind. And, different days, you'd be more convinced it was going to happen than not.
I think at this point in the war as well, so it's 1944, Germany is not doing so good. No. It's not going to last long. America's got the upper hand on the Pacific Theatre. Some people have argued that their main race was against the end of the war rather than against Germany.
Yeah.
So, as in their funding will be cut.
Well, it's justifying the funding and... a true test of the bombs and stuff.
Yeah, like, that's true, yeah.
If the war ends, we've spent all this money, then we're going to look pretty stupid.
And also, I guess, the more desperate you make a country during war, so the more desperate you make Germany by closing in on them and winning the war, the more desperate measures they're going to take, which may be...
They may have top secret stuff that is close that we don't know about.
Exactly.
Because the higher-ups, Groves and all that, would probably have an idea of where certain things were at in Germany, at least up to a certain point.
The thing, like, I'll go on to talk about Japan and stuff in a bit, but from what I read, the original plan, the original targets was Germany, because they thought Germany would develop in a bomb, and Germany were kind of the main enemy of the war, even for America, even though they're fighting on two fronts. So Germany was the main target. But by this point, I think in 1944, D-Days happened. The Germans are on the back foot. It was kind of like, we don't need to. But yeah, so that is kind of all the build-up. We get the juicy stuff next. Leslie Groves met with General Henry Arnold, the chief of the US Army Air Force, in March 1944 to discuss the delivery of the finished bombs to their target.
Right.
So they've got the designs now. They've got the science mostly done. Groves was hoping that the Boeing B-29 Superfortress would carry the finished bombs. A joint Manhattan Project / US Air Force targeting committee was established to determine which cities in Japan should be targets.
I do find it interesting that most of the project so far has been army-based and it's been done by the army.
Yeah.
But it was always going to be the case, well, I assume it was always going to be the case that the Air Force would deliver the bomb.
I think as like the biggest branch of the military, they've got kind of the most power. But and also though, a lot of it would have been thinking about Germany as well, so that would have been more men on the ground knowing what's going on.
Yeah, I guess, but you wouldn't have some random soldier saying, "Oh, we're just going to run over the top and plant the bomb and then run away really quickly."
You have to run away really quickly. But they recommended as the cities to target in Japan. By this point, they're kind of like, Germany's done for. And they went with Kokura, Hiroshima, Niigata, and Kyoto as their 4 potential targets. At this point, Secretary of War Henry Stimson intervened, announcing that he'd be making the targeting decision as Secretary of War, and he would not authorize the bombing of Kyoto. Groves tried to change his mind several times, but Stimson kept refusing. Kyoto had been the capital of Japan for centuries and was of great cultural and religious significance. They didn't want to destroy all that kind of history.
And I guess also you want to almost destroy someone into submission, but not to the extent where, well, everything's gone. We may as well fight to the last person, which was already the kind of Japanese military doctrine.
It seems like Groves, being more insistent on Kyoto, wanted to wipe out the Japanese essentially to win the war. So Kyoto, was ruled out, and Groves removed it from the list of nuclear targets, but also removed it as a target for conventional bombing as well, because Stimson had kind of made this big point. Nagasaki was then substituted for Kyoto as a 4th target.
Because I was going to, so it swaps to be that.
Yeah, so it's now Kokura, Hiroshima, Niigata, and Nagasaki as the 4 potential targets. The team was now ready to test their first bomb. The test was codenamed Trinity, and a location in New Mexico was selected. The weapon was put on top of a 30-meter steel tower to give an indication of how the bomb would behave when dropped from a plane. At 5:30 on the 16th of July 1945, the first ever nuclear bomb was detonated. It left a crater 76 meters wide. The shockwave was felt over 100 miles away, and the mushroom cloud reached 12 kilometers high.
Wow.
They were like,
ridiculous.
Yeah, they were like, thinking at this point, like, the conventional bombs were maybe take out a building.
Yeah.
They were like, holy fuck, this is huge.
Yeah.
And this was at this point 4-5 years in the making?
Yeah, so this is 1945, so it's 3 years of the Manhattan Project, but kind of a few more that first discussed. It's very quick progress. I mean, it was 6 years ago that Leo Szilard first mentioned we could make a bomb with uranium and stuff. So ridiculous progression when you've got all the country's top scientists working on one thing.
Yeah, it was like Hamish was saying, it's the pressure of war. It's often all these scientific
Imagine what they could achieve for good if they put their minds to it. Oppenheimer later recalled after this bombing that while witnessing the explosion, he had thought of a verse from the Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita, which was, if the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the mighty one.
Okay.
So
it's an interesting twist on it.
So he'd studied Hindu texts for a while.
It's
and
part
that
of his
kind
philosophy and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's this kind of, he's seeing it as this kind of divine light almost.
Yeah,
and
it's like,
seeing it
it's so big and
glorious...
impressive. It's almost beyond human like power.
Yeah.
Years later, he said that another verse also entered his head at the time, which he translated as, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
That's the one we know.
Yeah. I like that little bit. It was like, oh no, it actually wasn't the line. But yeah, that's the later line.
Yeah.
Among those presents with Oppenheimer in the control bunker at the site was his brother Frank, the communist. When asked what Robert's first words were after the test, Frank said that Robert said, I guess it worked.
Yeah, so it's like you said, he kind of changes around his... he's like, no, I definitely thought it was something really cool.
Yeah, I am become death, the destroyer was is a bit cooler than I guess it worked. The following day, Leo Szilard and other prominent members of the Manhattan Project wrote a letter to the new president, Harry Truman, begging for the bomb not to be used on Japan. Because they were like, this is too much.
Now they've seen it in action. Yeah.
They've witnessed the destroyer of worlds.
But this letter never reached Harry Truman.
Oh, really?
So he never received this warning from the guy who essentially kicked this off.
Is that are we to think that is somebody he just didn't pass it on because of the reasons that
it had lots of people to go through to get to Truman. One of them may have just been like, no.
No.
It was estimated at this point probably no more than a few dozen men in the entire country knew the full meaning of the Manhattan Project. And perhaps only 1,000 others were even aware that work on atoms was involved. Warned that disclosing the project's secrets was punishable by 10 years in prison or a fine of $10,000 which is $163,000 today. The workers involved saw enormous quantities of raw materials enter factories with nothing coming out, and just monitored dials and switches behind thick concrete walls whilst mysterious reactions took place on the other side, never knowing the purpose of their jobs.
There must have been some crazy conspiracy theories going on there.
Yeah.
Probably like the comic, doing some sort of interdimensional...
And it said there was like 130,000 people working on this, and they're saying maybe like 30 of them knew that they're making a bomb.
In the lunch canteens and that, there would have been some fun conversations there.
The water cooler chat must have been off the scale.
You have a little one of those pools up like on a chalkboard. Who had nuclear bomb? Who had nuclear bomb? Just one guy, Oppenheimer. He made a fortune on that pool.
He'd probably do that as well, just to be like, after the war, one factory manager said, well, it wasn't the job that was tough. It wasn't that the job was tough, it was confusing. You see, no one knew what was being made, not even me. And a lot of people thought they were wasting their time here when there was a war going on in Europe. Obviously, mostly it would be fit young men working in this factory. It was up to me to explain to the dissatisfied workers that they were doing a very important job. When they asked me what, I'd have to tell them it was a secret. But I almost went crazy myself trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
Right. So he wasn't even lying.
That's
because
the thing.
He didn't know
what it was.
But he had to be like, it's top secret, you can't know. Whilst in his head being like, I also want to know.
And they'd also be like, come on, mate. Like, just, they're down the pub. Yeah, come on, mate.
Come on, mate.
And then, I swear, I don't know. I don't know.
The trust involved between each level to not know what's going on.
Considering you said the predecessor to Oppenheimer left because of disorganization. So it's a surprise that
it must have stepped up quite a bit.
I suppose as soon as it starts getting real, they're like, okay.
Yeah. Following the Trinity test, all components of the bombs were shipped to Tinian, an American island 2,500 kilometers south of Japan. The ship took 10 days to arrive to Tinian, and just 4 days later, after it got there, was sunk by a Japanese submarine.
No.
So, a close call. Meanwhile, at the Potsdam Conference, where President Harry Truman met with Joseph Stalin, Winston Churchill, and later Clement Attlee to discuss the future of Germany, who had just surrendered, Truman was informed that the test had been a success. He in turn told Stalin that the US had a new super weapon, but refused to elaborate.
He just wants to show off straight away.
Many people believe that Stalin knew they had a nuke at this point.
Considering they had spies within.
And had already started their own nuclear program.
You can imagine one of those photos of like all the leaders, and he's like, mate. Like, mate. He's got his elbow. Mate, I've got a great weapon.
I get the feeling that Roosevelt would have stayed completely quiet about this.
Well, Stalin probably knew the test was successful before most of the
It was ages after the test that Truman was actually told. So I mean, I'd say ages, like weeks after. You'd think,
Stalin's like, oh really?
Or was he worried that he was talking about something else?
Like, he's talking about the alien ones.
I've known about the nuclear bomb for 2 weeks now. What are you talking about?
So they've sent all this stuff to the Pacific, their Pacific island Tinian. On the 6th of August 1945, the plane Enola Gay left Tinian with Little Boy in its bomb bay. Its target was Hiroshima, the headquarters of the Japanese army. The bomb was assembled in the air to avoid detonation in the event of a crash during takeoff. So they built it up once they got up there. The bomb was detonated 530 meters above Hiroshima. An area of 4.7 square miles was destroyed. Japanese officials determined that 69% of Hiroshima's buildings were destroyed. 150,000 people were killed immediately, and another 70,000 were injured, a lot of which would later die from their injuries. So they've done it now. That's it, no turning back. 3 days after Hiroshima, another plane, Boxcar, left Tinian with Fat Man on board, so the other type of bomb that he'd been making. Kokura was the target, but heavy cloud coverage had obscured the city. After 3 runs over the city, they headed to their second target, Nagasaki, a city that wasn't even on the original list of targets. The bomb was dropped over the industrial area, and 44% of the city was destroyed. 40,000 people were killed immediately, 60,000 were injured. Another 40,000 people would die within 4 months due to the bomb.
Wow.
Leslie Groves expected another bomb to be dropped soon after, with 3 more in September and another 3 in October.
So he's going all out.
So he was planning 3 August, 3 September, 3 October, which would probably be most of Japan's major cities at this point. Work at Los Alamos began on another Fat Man as soon as the Nagasaki bomb was dropped, ready to be used on the 19th of August.
Wow, so real quick after then.
So it's the 6th of August, the 9th of August, and they were like, this was a success, let's do it again. However, the day after Nagasaki, President Truman requested that no more bombs be dropped without his express authority. On the 15th of August 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced that Japan would surrender and formally signed the surrender on the 2nd of September. So it ended the war, but a lot of people have died as a result.
What was the major difference between the 2 bombs there? Because they were slightly different designs, or were they, for us, fundamentally pretty much the same?
I think the main thing for them was how it was detonated. I think Nagasaki had more problems with ongoing radiation and people died months after. So I think the Fat Man bomb had more like ongoing stuff after.
More radiation kind of.
I think it may have been a bigger explosion as well.
So it carried the material more.
But Little Boy had kind of destroyed more of the city, so I think
more
that
of an explosive kind of. Because
I don't know the specifics.
I'm sure both of them had similar effects, but I think some of the ones where people are getting kind of atomized and the shadows on the walls and stuff, that might be more of a Hiroshima thing, but it probably both to some degree.
I think, after the bombings, they then started wanting to produce more Fat Man bombs. So I think
that was obviously
that's one they liked more.
The big chunky one. Makes sense.
Immediately after the bombings, the morality of the event was brought into question, and whether or not it should be categorized as a war crime.
Yeah, definitely.
Those who support the bombing genuinely argue that that causing the Japanese to surrender prevented massive casualties on both sides in the eventual invasion of Japan, as Hirohito was unlikely to surrender unless completely overwhelmed.
And I guess, that they're kind of the military thinking beforehand was island hopping, wasn't it? So the United States were invading an island, and the Japanese would dig into that island.
And as we kind of saw a few years earlier with the Nazis trying to invade Britain, it's very, very hard to cross a channel and to invade. So that was their argument, that thousands of people are going to die if these people don't die, essentially. Those who oppose the bombings argue that a naval blockade and conventional bombing would have forced Japan to surrender anyway, without having to drop this second bomb or even the first bomb, especially with the Soviet invasion of Manchuria and other Japanese-held areas in Asia. Another common argument is that the bombing of Nagasaki just 3 days after Hiroshima was completely unnecessary.
Yes,
it's kind
of by accident as well. It wasn't on purpose. There was a bad weather over a different city.
I read as well that, like, obviously it's 3 days isn't much time to react to anything, but I read they didn't know what happened at Hiroshima at first. There was just radio silence.
Right.
Like, didn't hear anything.
Who's going to be able to contact?
And they to send like planes over there from like Tokyo to figure out what was going on, and they just obviously, I think they still could see elements of the mushroom cloud and just the destruction, and they were like, holy shit. I think there was rumors that there'd been a really big explosion in Hiroshima, but they had no idea the severity of it.
I mean, the scary thing is as well with radiation, and I mentioned Chernobyl because the TV series recently was very good at kind of both explaining and seeing the damage it can do. Like, the scary thing about that is not knowing too much about it. You know, if you're approaching to try and help people, and then the lasting effects, and you know, radiation burns, and it's just horrific.
And the wind as well. The wind blows radiation. That's going to affect.
I mean, the one
more people.
If you're even arguing for one, then one is enough, kind of thing. In that sense, like it. I know they probably wanted to do both to try and compare the two, at least.
And if there's fears that, you know, Hirohito's so stubborn he wouldn't surrender anyway, give it more than 3 days, surely.
You would hope.
Give them time to assess like how bad it was, because it's pretty
that's
bad.
What I'm thinking, because even within, I mean, obviously with the long-term effects, those are kicking in straight away. But within 3 days, some of those effects haven't even kicked in yet.
So, exactly. Early critics of the bombings, particularly the second one, were Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard. 1 star out of 5. With Szilard arguing that had the Germans dropped bombs on the US, then they would have been accused of war crimes at Nuremberg and hanged. Which they would have been 100%. It had also been suggestions that the bombings were not only an attack on Japan, but a warning to the Soviet Union, the first act of the Cold War to prevent Soviet control of Japan, who had declared war on Japan the day after Hiroshima. So they'd been doing their stuff in Europe, hadn't really focused on Japan.
Right.
Had only just turned to Japan once they moved their troops over there. Hiroshima dropped, they declared war, and America were like, oh shit, we can't let the Soviets.
Right. So that's part of the reasoning for the second bomb.
Then. And obviously the Soviets are very close to Japan as well. So they'd already invaded.
Well, they'd had wars beforehand, hadn't they?
Russo-Japanese War.
It was 40 years before this. They'd been invading Manchuria and other Japanese places in China. Robert Oppenheimer travelled to Washington on the 17th of August to hand deliver a letter to the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, expressing his revulsion and his wish to see nuclear weapons banned. In October 1945, Oppenheimer was granted an interview with President Truman. The meeting went badly after Oppenheimer had said he had felt he had blood on his hands. The remark infuriated Truman and put an end to the meeting. Truman later told his undersecretary, I don't want to see that son of a bitch in that office ever again.
I mean, I guess from like I was saying earlier, like, how could you not know what you're getting in for? But I suppose if they've only tested it, you know, however many times before, and I think never on a real target.
I think for a lot of these scientists as well, like, they know what they're doing, and they've seen the potential destruction it can do. But then once you kind of this destruction's happened and you've seen hundreds of thousands of people are dead, you'd be like, holy shit, it'd make you kind of reassess.
I'm sure it would, but I feel like you could argue as well that maybe you should have assessed that before. Like, I know there's science for science sake, and that's probably
it's the unending march of technology and advancement.
But you know you're making a bomb, so it's like, you know,
they weren't ever under any other illusion, because they were working. He got a lieutenant colonel's uniform.
He literally got his uniform.
Yeah,
what do you think he was going to do in that? Like, go do to Peace Corps or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, this ended the war. The Cold War started, and there's that whole stuff that we won't go into too much detail on. But in 1948, so a few years after the war now, General of the Army Dwight D. Eisenhower made it clear that he found Leslie Groves rude, arrogant, and insensitive, causing Groves to realise that in the rapidly shrinking post-war military, he would never have the same power he wielded in the Manhattan Project ever again, and decided to leave the army.
Okay.
So a man who had been involved with the army since he was born, now quit.
Cut his ties completely.
Because he couldn't play with his toys anymore.
He'd gone out on a high,
and Eisenhower, who's basically in charge of the military, hated him. Thought he was a dick. In 1954, so 9 years later now, Robert Oppenheimer was subject of a security hearing held by the United States Atomic Energy Commission, headed by Lewis Strauss, following a letter from William Borden, former director of the Atomic Energy Commission. In his letter, Borden stated that Oppenheimer was making regular donations to the Communist Party. His wife and his brother were communists. All his friends were communists. His mistress was a communist. His early recruits during the war were communists. He was in frequent contact with Soviet spies, and he repeatedly gave false information to General Groves before his formal hiring in the Manhattan Project.
Wow.
And some other accusations. During the Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer had been suspected of still working with the Communist Party, but Boris Pash, who was in charge of investigating potential communist communication, concluded that whilst he may be in contact, his personal honour and concern for his reputation would prevent him from selling secrets.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I got from the start. Like, he seemed like he had his ideologies in that direction, and he had all the connections, but
his main passion is science.
And also, like, he kind of seemed to know that if he got too involved, he wouldn't be able to carry on with his work.
Yeah.
So, like, the fact that he was the only one that in his social group that wasn't actually officially a member of the Communist Party, it's kind of like just off the record, you know.
Is that not himself building a cover?
Yeah,
so,
well,
actually, technically, I'm not part of the Communist Party.
But
so
you'd
you
also think that
it.
it's also like, what is it like? The only reason we see black holes is because of like the absence of the other
that's
stuff. It's kind of like you actually make it way more obvious that you're a communist by.
Yeah, the fact that he like had a wife, mistress, his brother, all his friends are communists,
and he was apparently donating money. Did you say as well? Like it's kind of But yeah, maybe not.
In total, the hearing focused on 24 allegations. 23 dealt with his communist affiliations, and 1 on his opposition to the continued research into nuclear bombs after the war.
Right.
How dare he want to stop weapons of mass destruction
that
being
was
built
based
anymore?
On the fact that he was technically still in employment of the government researching this stuff. So his opposition to it is kind of like
a contract breach kind of thing, isn't it? Yeah.
In a 2-1 vote, Oppenheimer's government clearance was revoked. They found 20 of the 24 charges to be at least substantially true.
Wow.
Oppenheimer would work abroad or independently for the next decade because he wasn't able to get a proper job in America because they basically said...
He's blacklisted, basically.
And also, to be fair, and the charges being proven substantially true, it was true that his mistress was a communist. It was true that his wife was a communist.
This is also...
like, if they're the charges...
But that's by association.
He also had brown hair. There you go. He's guilty of that as well. Yeah, exactly. Like...
This is kind of like the peak of like the McCarthyism in America, where if anyone even said the C word, they're an enemy of the state and thrown in jail. So
yeah, especially if you're literally working for the government at the time.
So like some of that, he may not have been doing any of it, but just the fact that like his brother and his wife were communists, it was enough for him to be kind of tarnished.
Yeah.
It was a decade later when after he'd been working abroad or independently, he actually went on tour of Japan at one point, giving lectures and stuff. So obviously America had big influence in Japan after the war, but
I'm surprised he was allowed a visa to get into Japan.
It would have been interesting seeing the Japanese react to the man who created the bombs.
You would not list your previous employers, would you, at all on that?
So you've got a gap in your CV from...
What were you doing during the war?
Must have been a Nazi. That's fine. They're our allies.
That's right, I assume he was talking about how bad the
Yeah,
nuclear weapons were, right? Yeah. And everyone's going, yeah, we know.
From basically the moment
we know.
You are preaching to the choir. Like.
From the moment that bomb was dropped on Nagasaki onwards, Oppenheimer's completely against nuclear bombs.
Oppenheimer.
Oh, that was it. Thanks, Hamish.
I was trying to think of like he was opposed. Opposed.
It was kind of after the horse was bolted, though. It's like
oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Later on, in the early 60s, a load of influential physicists convinced President John F. Kennedy to award Oppenheimer the Enrico Fermi Award in 1963. So Fermi's back again, got an award named after him for his contribution to physics and as a gesture of political rehabilitation.
Right.
Now that the dust is settled, it's 18 years later, they're like
bringing him back in.
JFK was assassinated shortly after the announcement.
Oh.
One of President Lyndon B. Johnson's first acts as president would be to give the award to Oppenheimer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Apparently, a few days after JFK was killed, he was going to meet the president. So he met Lyndon B. Johnson and bumped into Jackie Kennedy. And she
still have the blood all over her.
Might have showered by then.
No, you know, there's those photos she had to go take. Like she had to keep the clothes on for like 6 hours. Or something afterwards. Yeah.
But apparently, she kind of really made a big point about how like looking forward to meeting Oppenheimer JFK was, and how like he really went to give this award.
Do we think there's anything connected there at all?
Probably not.
Think
unfortunate timing, I reckon.
The shooter was a real pro-nuclear weapons guy.
Maybe. It's interesting. So, like, obviously, that this is for rehabilitation, like the political rehabilitation of Oppenheimer. So, are we saying, or are they saying, well, just whether he's the good guy or not? Because it's like
Hamish in real life.
yeah. But then, like, so.
What you mean it is in like for the American people?
Yeah,
like, are they supposed to be?
Do you blame the guy who made the gun or the guy who shoots the gun? Because the only reason to make a gun is to kill someone.
This is and to be fair, I know this is probably what we could talk about right at the end. I know we're probably near the end, but this is my problem with the film that we watched about the boy making the bomb, because he was making it for the sake of making it. And it was like a silly little science project. But my frustration with that was like, you don't make a fucking bomb unless you want it to go off. And I kept saying to Lewis, if he wants to prove that he's good, make a reactor, not a bomb. And he specifically makes a bomb. And I feel like I mean, maybe there's a parallel there intentionally. They called it the same name.
Yeah.
But they didn't like lean on that parallel at all. There's no questioning why he made it. He just makes it. So maybe that is supposed to be.
I think the point with the whole
metaphor.
Good guy thing as well is that like this is now the early 60s, the height of the Cold War. Cuba's happened.
He must be quite old at this point then as well.
He would have been 59 when he got this award, so he was quite young when he was working on the project in his early 40s.
So old Killian might be a little bit old for him then, really.
Probably quite.
He's always looked the same, isn't he?
But yeah, this is like at the point where they're having an arms race with the Soviets. So I think parading the guy who got them started on this is probably a like, look how great we are kind of thing.
Yeah.
From them, like,
and I guess it's like a bit of like, hey, if we want to make something even better, we've got the guy here, kind of thing.
Yeah, like, it's like the Soviets paraded Yuri Gagarin around for decades after he was the first man in space.
But he didn't blow up the moon, did he? So.
No. Although we talked about potential plans.
A119.
Yeah, there was when after Yuri Gagarin went into space, the Americans were worried that they were behind in the space race, and one of their plans was to shoot a nuke on the moon.
Why not? Yeah.
And who was the famous scientist that was involved?
The most famous,
a really famous scientist.
Like think of like American astrophysicist, TV guy. Do you know who we're talking about?
The science guy?
Not Bill Nye.
No. He wears like a turtleneck. He's got like not a turtleneck, like a beige jumper on. He was the predecessor to Neil deGrasse Tyson on that program.
That's the next person I was going to say.
No, it's way before him. Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan.
Yeah, he was involved in the plan to nuke the moon.
Ridiculous.
But yeah, anyway, Oppenheimer, as I mentioned, was a chain smoker and was diagnosed with throat cancer 2 years after his award in 1965.
Oh, it'd be awful he's having radiotherapy kind of thing. Because maybe.
After
He'd know all about it. He'd be like, yeah.
After inconclusive surgery, he underwent unsuccessful radiation treatment and chemotherapy.
Cut that.
In late 1966. He fell into a coma on February 15th, 1967, and died at his home in Princeton, New Jersey on the 18th of February, aged 62.
Wow.
It's 1966. Leslie Groves, after
666.
Leslie Groves, after enjoying his retirement for the last 20 years, suffered a heart attack caused by chronic calcification of the aortic valve on the 13th of July 1970.
Bad diet then, probably.
Yeah, he's always on the chubbier side, even in the pictures of him during World War II. He was rushed to Walter Road Army Medical Center in Washington, where he died that night, aged 73. The arms race created by the Manhattan Project's success would be central to the Cold War that lasted another 46 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with the US and the Soviet Union almost reaching all-out war in 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes.
In 1996, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was signed by the 5 nuclear powers, the US, Russia, China, the UK, and France, as well as 66 other countries. As of 2023, 186 nations have signed the treaty, and only 3 nations have tested a nuclear bomb since. Twice by India and Pakistan each in 1998, and 6 times by North Korea between 2006 and 2017.
Oh.
They didn't sign it.
Yeah.
India and Pakistan have got their own stuff going on,
Yeah,
and North Korea's North Korea.
And Iran to be in the next 5 years, do we think?
Potentially.
Something like that?
Given the wide-scale death and destruction of Little Boy and Fat Man and the ongoing nuclear tensions since, it cannot be argued that Leslie Groves and J. Robert Oppenheimer stand amongst the most momentous people in modern history.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, quite an impact they had.
Yeah.
Is it? Are they morally right or wrong?
Oh, that's
I
the
guess?
question,
Like,
though, isn't it? Really?
Well, ambiguous, I guess.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where like history is written by the victor. Like as Leo Szilard said, if Germans had used the nukes, it would have been like the worst thing to have happened in the 20th century and demonized for it.
Yeah.
But because we were on the side that did it and the side that won.
But then, so what time frame was? So Germany had already capitulated by the time the first nuclear bomb was dropped. So
it was like 9 weeks before.
Yeah, and they were behind
on
the Manhattan Project by a significant margin.
Yeah.
So they weren't going to drop a nuclear bomb.
No.
I don't know much about the Japanese equivalent of
think...
Manhattan Project, but it doesn't sound like it was any...
They had started working on stuff. They'd got Germany to send them some uranium because Germany had access to the only uranium on the Axis side, but they hadn't made much progress.
So I don't really hold much weight in the argument that if someone else had used it, it would be awful because they weren't in a position to use it.
Yeah, but I suppose it's more saying like the way that we view the events is very
through
our political kind of alignment.
Western skew.
I think the fact that even there's no defining view for most people. Most people agree there's a bit of here and there, or you lean fully one way.
Yeah, I think one thing like looking on it is that like, but at the time the bombs were dropped, it was basically Japan against the world. They'd lost all their allies. All like America, the UK, the Soviets, and most of Europe had finished doing their stuff in Europe and could turn their attention to Japan.
Yeah,
like.
Well, yeah, soldiers were being sent over. If they had enough points, they could go home. If they didn't have enough points, then they'd be sent over to Japan.
Yeah,
and was you saying that at that point they were never going to get too far?
Yeah, and there's the argument that thousands of people would die in an invasion of Japan. You don't even need to invade Japan. No. Like they mentioned, you can blockade Japan.
It's an island nation.
Yeah, you can siege it essentially.
I suppose, like with the outlook of like even kamikaze fighters, there's a certain outlook in Japanese military.
But I think with America, Soviets, UK combined as allies, you can rule the air over Japan as well.
Yeah, and I'm
Bombing
just thinking
campaigns, shooting down their
that
fighters.
attitude of giving yourself as part of a greater good. If that carried on, I think that was part of the reason why they were like, we need to do something.
I did see
crazy big, basically.
I did read when Japan finally realized they had to surrender. Hirohito's one condition was that their like political structure would stay in place, because they've, as they claim, have got an ongoing list of emperors going back to like 700 BC as a continuous line going back. I think like Hirohito is like the 125th emperor of Japan or something. So like it's a long old history. But then, so they wanted to maintain that. But then, you can kind of blockade Japan, say you can keep that.
Yeah.
And Hirohito did say if they turned that down, then they would have carried on fighting. But
really?
He wanted to keep his power.
Yeah.
But I think that the Americans were always happy to have him as like a puppet leader, which is essentially what he became over the next 30 years.
Like concessions there, because ideologically it's not as against us as what the Nazis were.
And I guess we are talking from a position of hindsight as well, which is always that wonderful thing. So saying that everyone was against Japan, I guess at the time maybe that wasn't enough for people to.
But like Lewis says, if you think about it as like alternate history, like Man in the High Castle kind of thing of like, if we lived in a world now where Washington was bombed, or maybe not the capital, if they did the same thing, California, let's say, California and New York or something were bombed, and regardless of what the regimes were now, like how we would look at it, I think people would find it hard to excuse that unless
we wouldn't, because we would have lost the war. So actually those would have seen as mercies.
Well, potentially.
It's one of those like
complicated.
Great like history what ifs that nobody can have a definitive answer.
Well, I think I can definitively say it was a bad thing to do.
I think it sucks. Basically,
I think
it's the civilian life that is the thing as well, because you can fight in a war and there can be like in the Blitz and stuff, there can be civilian casualties from bombing raids and stuff, which most people would argue, like even when parts of Germany were bombed by us, we've kind of forgotten about that very conveniently.
Like Dresden
is what I'm thinking of.
Awful.
But even that is, you'd argue that a lot of that would be, or at least ideally, to target certain infrastructure and that sort of thing. Whereas this is on a whole other scale. Almost none of the people that were involved probably had any wish to be involved in the conflict at all. And it's just
that's why, like, I think there is a difference as well between Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because Hiroshima was like the head of the Japanese army, and whilst it's awful to bomb it, that happened. I think that Nagasaki was just another city that was a backup to a backup choice that happened just a few days later. It's kind of like, what was the purpose of that kind of thing?
It's really hammering in the point, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, and I've seen arguments as well as that, like, they just wanted to see what the bombs could do, particularly the second one, because it was a different type of bomb.
It sounds
and also, I do understand the argument about like Dresden saying about the targeting the infrastructure and civilian like kind of byproducts.
It's almost like how much you can justify.
But then also, why should we say that it's acceptable to kill like a truck full of 10 soldiers and it's not acceptable to kill 10 civilians?
People would argue that
life is a life.
Absolutely.
People would argue they've signed up for the war, but at this point,
but then, do you deserve, just because you sign up for something, doesn't it deserve the worst consequences of
especially like being wiped out in an instant? Not even given like people sign up because they want to fight. They don't want to be just a potential.
You don't sign up to
number.
Die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to be given a fighting. I mean, I'm not a pro-military person at all, but if I signed up to the military, I'd be doing it because I'd want to make a difference, and I wouldn't want to just be like a number that can just be blinked out in a blink of an eye. And people go, "Oh no, he signed up for it. It's fine." It's like, no, it's not.
I did see it on one point. Some pro-bomb people argued that Japan had established a system of total war by this point, where all their factories and everything was working towards the war effort. Everyone was working on the war effort. But then these people didn't get a choice to do that.
No.
Like,
Well, that's the other thing as well. At this point, anyone who's able is being conscripted into any.
And if they don't follow that conscription, then they die. So what do you choose? You choose immediate death, or do you choose the potential that causing harm to others, but I might survive, or that it's...
And I think there's kind of arguments go out the window when you see like the pictures of like the burnt child's bodies and stuff.
Well, it's like the atomized remains, the shadows on the walls, and the stories of people with like bleeding eyes, and there's some awful. I can't remember. I think it was at school. There was an assembly like presentation, and it was somebody who was like a child I think it was in Hiroshima, who was talking about the experience, and it was all like drawings they'd done as a child, and it was just horrific stuff for people like like zombie kind of imagery, and it was awful.
I think we're all on pretty much the same. I think once again we've done a project report that has ended up concluding that like, God, America are pretty bad, aren't they? Every time.
Well, it seems to be, a lot of the major military projects are American, aren't they? Or at least the kind of dubious ones that go down in history.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said earlier about how the British project was like taken over or given to the American project.
Yeah.
It does seem like we had a tendency to do that in the Second World War. It's like we create a computer, and we'll just give it to the Americans.
And obviously we sent a load of our scientists over there as well. I think it's largely because we were on the face of the war and had no money and were rationing. It was like, whereas America, like mainland America, was largely unaffected by the war. Like the day-to-day life in America wasn't really changed unless you were Japanese.
It is quite bizarre.
That's a good point to put in concentration camp.
But like, even like Pearl Harbor is Hawaii, which is miles.
It is bizarre
away.
to think about, because we've got so many in images of like I say, the Blitz, like rationing, all these things of it being so close to us. It's almost like I hadn't really thought about it.
I guess the main thing for America was the letters to the front door where their service people had died. That was the main kind of like...
There's like, we had that as well. It's like everyone's like, I know my grandmother was sent away from London during the war and never went back, and eventually met my grandfather. So like, like, it's stuff that has affected us. Like, even today, like, people know somebody that knows somebody that's got a story to do with it. Whereas America was largely untouched. Interesting topic.
Interesting.
Interesting, if not slightly depressing, but interesting.
I'm quite intrigued to see, like, I mean, I imagine a lot of this will be shown in Oppenheimer, but also what stuffs they kind of really focus down and dramatize. And then there might be some stuff that comes on the screen and I was like, oh, I cut that because I didn't think it was interesting.
I feel like, based on the fact that, you spoke a little bit about his personal life, how kind of complicated it was, how he's quite a complicated guy. Imagine there's quite a lot to work with there. And
the casting sounds great for that kind of complicated, moody character.
I'm wondering how heavy they'll go with the communist stuff as well, because obviously
they could make it like
Americans quite often hide away from that kind of thing.
And it'd be interesting, the end point of the film, like what period of Oppenheimer's life are they going to end it on? Are they going to end on his death? Are they going to end it on
we were talking earlier, and one of the teaser trailers seemed to show like a court case of some point, which may be that security hearing.
I think that sounds
which
right.
Is mostly talking about him potentially being a communist. So
I'd love to see him do a tour of Japan. It'd be really interesting to see that kind of.
I mean, it'd be crazy if like it was barely like the main Manhattan Project stuff, and it was pre and post. I wouldn't put it past.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
I mean, even like we were speaking about Dunkirk and Memento and how they kind of play with the timelines and the time. And, it's very likely that there's some little twist on the way this is presented.
I think I read
us,
early on after this film was announced that there was going to be some time stuff going on.
Right, yeah.
So we'll see. By the time this episode comes up, we would have already seen it.
Exactly. So this will be a week today as time of recording. So we're all completely clueless about what's going to be. But
it could be awful.
I mean,
Hopefully not.
it's almost twice as long as this report, though. So I wonder what they're gonna.
Well,
more than twice.
Imagine Lewis talking for that long.
There's, I don't
imagine he looks like Cillian Murphy.
I don't think I've got as much sex scenes in this report as the film might have.
Oh no, there was only that one in the middle. We cut that out. Sorry, everyone.
It's too explicit.
It was great. I had a great time.
But yeah, I think that brings us to the end of the Manhattan Project
thank you
report.
for telling us that, Lewis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for talking for so long.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
Yeah, you probably need a little break now.
Tired,
but
yeah.
no, it was very interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. So that means it's now time for our next part of the pod, which is
Personal
projects.
It's personal.
Projects.
So, Hamish, what have you been doing, reading, watching, playing, or collecting?
So I've just been getting into a bit of Magic the Gathering.
Oh, what magic are you gathering?
All of the colours of Magic that are there. So it's like a card game, like Pokémon.
Yeah, I've got a couple of friends that are into it.
And I bought my first kind of as a game night set, which is like the 5 colours, and you've each got like a mono.
Are they kind of like elemental? Kind
yeah,
of
exactly that.
I don't know much about it.
So
but
you've got like white, black, blue, red, and green.
The colours.
The colours.
Thanks for explaining. I was a bit confused what you meant by colours. I was thinking like wall and tree and fire.
Well, they kind of do equate to that. So like
which
white
one's
is
white?
blue. But actually, they've all got a bit. There is a specific card type called a wall, which has got like
Lewis, you know way more.
It's got no attack but lots of defense, and that's kind of what you use it for. But so it's just something I got into it from playing Magic the Gathering Arena, which is like the online version.
Right.
So you've got like Hearthstone, those kind of things, and I got playing that, and then just thought, well, why not play with my friends instead of faceless entities on the internet? So
do you have any friends that play Magic the Gathering?
No. You didn't even have to finish the end of that sentence.
But the point of the party starter kit is it's got enough to do multiple.
Exactly, right. And it's all like core set, so that is like the basic kind of stuff that you need to start like playing a deck, and just starting that and getting a few friends involved in that.
Nice.
I would quite like to play it at some point. I've never. I don't really know much.
It's one of those ones that feels like it's got such like a steep learning curve.
Yeah,
that is kind of like
I think that's the kind of advantage with this game night set is that it gives you that kind of first look into Magic.
Gives you a balance.
Yeah, exactly. And without going too much into depth and saying, well, you play this card and this does this and that allows you to do 4 things. Instead of like that kind of in-depth complex systems, it's got a bit more basic where it's like, okay, this is what you can do. You can do 2 things with this card. And
do you know if each of those sets are they carbon copies of each other? So if people bought,
so they're not card. So
if I bought one of them, would we have the exact same?
Yeah, exactly.
Cards
What it is the game night set, and it's you've got 5 core sets that are pretty much all the same. I think for all sets, all those 5 sets you'll get. And the sets are designed to balance against each other, so you're not going to have like the red set isn't going to be more powerful than any others. It's they're balanced.
So you can only play as one color at once
in this set specifically. So they're the monocolored decks, but then that's just an introduction, and then you can go out and buy boost.
Could you then take from those and build your own deck?
Yeah, you could do. The only problem would you could do.
Effectively.
What you normally want is if you go outside that kind of starter set is then you'd want colours that harmonise and like they
work well together.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
balance
So
each other out,
sometimes you can get like a blue-black card that will do certain things and interact specifically with blue and black cards, rather than just being blue color.
So it's more to get you involved in the systems than actually be a starter in terms of, because we've spoken before, Hamish, about like the Lord of the Rings one that is quite expensive.
Yeah, so
that's more of a themed.
Yeah, so they have throughout, like, because it's been going, I think, since the 80s, maybe 90s, and so it's been going for a long time, and they have had like themed decks or themed kind of issues,
right?
Or like rounds of decks being cards being sent out, and so Lord of the Rings is probably one of the most recent ones.
I think there was Doctor Who at some point.
And there's been Baldur's Gate, D&D, that kind of thing, and then you also
and do those play against each other? They're all
exactly. So you can obviously you've got tournament ones where you've got certain rules. You can only play certain cards from like the second series or whatever, because over the period of time, like over the time of the game, certain like cards can become like you just get infinite goes on certain cards if you play it in a certain way, and then that just spoils the game. So you don't play that in the tournament style, but if you're just playing with friends, you can do whatever you want.
It's a little bit like, I mean, we've spoken about Unmatched on the podcast before, and we've all played Unmatched together here.
Exactly.
There's been people kind of saying that some of the earlier or later sets, because they weren't necessarily intended, they're intended to work together and against each other, but the balancing issues weren't always thought about. And I imagine it's a similar thing.
Exactly, yeah. You can have certain synergies that from like one of the earlier cards and one of the later cards that means that you just win the game pretty much. Like, so that is banned at tournament styles, and you probably don't want to do that when you're just playing with friends. But I do. It depends how competitive you are. But like if Unmatched were to go on for another 10, 15 years, you're gonna have sets like you're gonna have a Dracula that has a great synergy with something in the
if you were
future
doing like
that's just going to break it.
Team situation.
Exactly,
I completely understand that. Fair enough. No, it sounds interesting.
Cool. How about you, Sam?
What, Magic the Gathering
or anything else?
No Magic the Gathering. I've watched a film recently.
Was it Dunkirk by any chance?
It was, but I'm not talking about that today. That episode will already be out, so everyone can hear mine and Lewis's thoughts on Dunkirk. But no, I watched.
How did it finish? What was the ending like?
We won.
No,
no, we didn't actually. We kind of lost at the end of that.
It was a successful evacuation.
That's a good spin.
We won that part of it, but no. No, I watched Mission Impossible Fallout.
Is that the new one?
This is not the new one, which is Dead Reckoning Part 1. But I realised that I hadn't seen a fair few of the new ones. So Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise have worked on the last 3 together, which is Rogue Nation. Sorry, I said that in a weird way. Rogue Nation, Fallout, and then Dead Reckoning, which is the new one. Right. So it's a trilogy of sorts, but you can kind of incorporate the previous one as well. So it's 4, 5. I don't know which one it is.
I think it is 4, 5, and 6. Didn't you had 1, 2, 3,
it's 7.
Rogue Nation. No, then Fallout.
Ghost Protocol.
Was
in the middle, which
Ghost
was
Protocol.
Brad Bird,
Forgot about that.
His first live action film. He did Incredibles.
Which number is Tokyo Drift?
It's 3.5.
It's a spin-off.
Although chronology. But I'd seen Ghost Protocol, which is like the modern reboot of it. It's after 3. It's the one that introduces Jeremy Renner. It's the one with the sticky gloves going up the Dubai.
Burj Khalifa.
Wiz Khalifa. It's climbing up Wiz Khalifa.
He is a tall geezer.
And that one's very good. And I hadn't seen Rogue Nation or Fallout, but specifically Fallout I want to talk about because honestly I thought it was a fantastic film. Have either of you guys seen it?
Yeah, I've only ever seen the first 2 Mission Impossible films.
I
think they're on Amazon. I
Channel 4.
Refute that statement just to say one is one of my favourite films.
Really?
Yeah. Mission Impossible 1 is so
Mission Impossible
good.
1 is good.
It's good, but like Fallout does everything much better. Like it is everything.
No, I disagree because like the not the gore, but like the grittiness of 1.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it's just because of the film style they did it in, or whether it was because early 2000s.
And it's also isn't it Brian De Palma who did that? Who's like he's up there.
And just the pulling the face mask off.
Oh yeah, but there's
just
some. I mean, don't spoil
good.
anything in Fallout for Lewis, because I honestly, I think even though I watched them all through, kind of leading up to Dead Reckoning, I think they all stand alone very well.
Is Dead Reckoning number 6 or number 7?
It's number 7. I was actually listening back to an episode that we did not that long ago, Lewis, and for some reason I was convinced it was 9. So I obviously had to
Fast and Furious throwing it off.
Yeah.
That's on like 10 or something.
It's
isn't it?
Harry Potter as well.
But ongoing series.
Oh, yeah,
but no, it's great. I mean, Henry Cavill's in it. It's the one that was filmed alongside Justice League. So
and his shotgun punch as
shotgun
well.
Yeah, said loads of stuff about that. How he didn't mean to do that. He just get his arms.
He's reloading his arms. Basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, that bathroom fight is fantastic. It's fun because Tom Cruise and Henry Cavill are getting beaten the shit out of. They're against one guy, and this guy is fucking handing them. It's like on par with like Daniel Craig, James Bond, where he's getting beaten the shit out of, and he's not always on top. It's not quite as gritty or realistic as those films, but that scene in itself is fantastic. There's a scene in London where Tom Cruise runs from St. Paul's Cathedral all the way across the top of Blackfriars, ends up on the top of the Tate Modern, chasing Henry Cavill the whole way. It's good stuff. That's where he broke his ankle. That bit where
he jumps over, doesn't he?
I saw an interview with Matt Damon. You know when you have those like a bunch of actors sit around a table and talk about acting.
Yeah.
He said he was talking to Tom Cruise once about like his stunts, and I think it might have been the one where he was like climbing up the Burj Khalifa.
Yeah, Wiz Khalifa.
Wiz Khalifa. And Tom Cruise was like, his high intense self, and was like, yeah, I went to do that. And he went to the security guy and was like, how do we do this? And the security guy was like, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. So he fired his security guy and got another one who said it was okay. And Matt Damon was like, if that was me, when the security guy said no, I would have been like, okay, I'm not doing that. But Tom Cruise,
that's the difference.
We spoke a couple of weeks ago how he's got plans to do a scene in space. He's in talks with SpaceX.
It's mental, this guy. Like, if I was to not know he was a member of the Scientology, I would believe, I would say, yes, he's definitely part of Scientology.
I feel like his personal life aside, I feel like we're quite fortunate to have him as somebody who just pushes the boundaries.
Yeah, push boundaries.
And also, he's such like a film buff and a film nerd anyway.
Well, doesn't he watch a film a day or something like that?
I think he goes to see like pretty much every major film that comes out.
I saw him talking about going to see Oppenheimer and Barbie. When he as soon as they come out.
I think he said he's doing the Friday and the Saturday. He's not doing them both in one because he needs to do one a day.
But he's talking about how he loves the atmosphere in like a packed cinema when you see a new release, and it's like he's like the opposite to like Bruce Willis, who hasn't seen a film in like 30 years.
I mean, part of that's not his fault, is it? Because he's got a degenerative brain condition.
But he hasn't had it for 30 years.
Well, yeah, that's true. But yeah, no, it's just fantastic. There's a helicopter chase at the end. You probably remember Hamish, which is great. It's the film that I think he did just before Top Gun Maverick. Although the release of that was then pushed by a couple of years, or at least big action film anyway. And some of it you can see where they got certain parts of Maverick, and I think it's probably a better film than Maverick, but like watching it at home, you don't fully get the same kind of impact. I would have loved to see the cinema, so I'm really excited to see the new one. Like, there's some mask stuff, there's deception, there's like, if you like spy films, like it's up there for sure. Like, I really recommend it.
I do need to get through them. We'll do them for silver screen.
I mean, they're on all 4 at the moment, Channel 4. So if you want to just watch, you probably don't want to watch them out of order, Lewis, do you?
No, if I sit down and watch them, I'll either watch the first again or number 3.
Yeah.
Right.
I would start from 1 and just carry on.
I've seen the first 2, so I might start from 3, but I might just start it
How long
again.
ago did you watch the first 2?
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, I'd still go for it, mate.
Yeah, I think they've got the rights to all of them on all 4. So although we are going to watch them next year, if that is when part 2 is coming out,
that's the plan.
I'm not sure. I mean, all these films, they're Spider-Verse and all that. They're like, oh, it's the next one's definitely next year, and then it's like.
Well, yeah, and also obviously they're under strike.
Exactly,
at the moment,
who knows what's happening with that? I don't think they've. I don't know. I'll find out. Who knows? But yeah, Lewis, what about you?
Yeah, so like, I've spent most of my time writing this report on the Manhattan Project, believe it or not. There's a couple of things that I've kind of mentioned before ongoing. 3/4 of the way through reading Colour of Magic.
Oh, nice.
Have you read Color Magic?
I haven't read it. No, I've heard good things about it.
It's good. I read it like 5-6 years ago, and I was like, "This is great." So I'm reading that on my lunch break at work.
Nice.
It's just a really funny, entertaining book. Me and Christina's still watching through Malcolm in the Middle.
Nice.
Which is just brilliant. Like we're on
lovely throwback. Nice.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus. So I think we're like end of season 3 now, and it's just so good. Christina had never properly watched it before, so it's just proper like laugh out loud moments. I'm just like, this is just great. Haven't really had the chance to do anything else. I got a Game Boy emulator for my phone yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Started playing Pokemon on my phone.
Lovely. Which one have you started on?
Blue.
Okay, interesting.
I think that was the one I played most of the kids. So I was like,
I was yellow.
Yeah, see, yellow and blue were the two I had as a kid, but I just remember playing blue more for some reason.
Nice. I remember as a kid, we went on family holiday, and it was around my birthday, and my parents got me a yellow Game Boy Color with Pokemon Yellow.
Yeah, I think I had the same experience as a kid. I think I preferred blue because you can start with Squirtle, who I liked more than. Although I did like Pokemon following you, Pikachu following you around. But yeah, I like Squirtle. Although the fucking game save didn't save properly when I was playing yesterday, so I have to.
How's it with your battery?
Fine.
Yeah,
okay. It's not too bad. I mean, it's not gonna fucking. It's a very old basic game. It's not gonna burn it through, but the emulator obviously might take it. But it's been fine so far.
Nice.
I usually burn out all my battery every day anyway. I usually sit at work with like Spotify open, like. On screen so I can see what I'm listening to like for the whole day, so usually
that explains why you never got battery when you get
yeah, I actually charged my phone at work today because I knew I was going to have to stare at it and read the report. But yes, I haven't really got anything new to update with. Just ongoing,
it sounds like it.
Ongoing stuff that I've
heard all this before, so but for your sake, Hamish.
Yeah, I think when I finish the Color Magic, I will either start the Light Fantastic, the second book, or another book that I've been meaning to read for a while. That Sam will know what I'm referring to. So I might start that one.
Porn.
The Big Book of Porn. Sam lent it
Did I
to me.
leave it round yours? Sorry.
Oh, you got a copy too.
Yeah, it says there's like 400 pages, but you can only see like 3 of them. They're all and they're really thick pages. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, so I haven't really got anything else. So I think that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for joining us, Hamish. It's been a pleasure having you on again.
Thank you very much for having me. And